What if I told you some of the most powerful predators in the world don't hunt in the dark? They offer you a dream first. It didn't begin with force. It didn't begin with fear. It began with something far more deceptive: opportunity. For many of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, the first interaction didn't feel like danger at all. It felt like luck, like being noticed, like being chosen in a world where they had been overlooked. And that is precisely what made his methods so effective. Because by the time the truth revealed itself, many were already too deeply entangled to easily walk away. Epstein did not select his victims randomly. His approach was calculated, deliberate, and disturbingly consistent. He sought out vulnerability, not just in age, though many of his victims were underage, but in circumstance. He targeted girls from unstable homes, those facing financial hardship, those without strong support systems, and those who were searching for a way out of their current reality. These were individuals who wanted something more, a better life, a chance. And Epstein presented himself as someone who could provide. But beyond her, there were others: assistants, employees, acquaintances, and, in some cases, even other victims. This created a disturbing cycle. Some victims, once brought into Epstein's world, were encouraged or pressured to recruit others. They were offered money or rewards for bringing in new girls, turning the system into something that could sustain and expand itself. It blurred the lines in a way that made the entire operation harder to detect. From the outside, it didn't look like a single predator. It looked like a web of connections. And inside that web, accountability became harder to trace. The initial pitch was almost always simple and intentionally misleading. Victims were told they could earn money for something as harmless as a massage. For many, especially those struggling financially, this seemed like an easy and safe opportunity. There was no immediate indication of what would follow, but the promise didn't stop at money. Epstein also leveraged his image as a wealthy and well-connected figure. He suggested he could help with education, introduce them to powerful people, or even open doors in industries like modeling or entertainment. Whether these promises were real or exaggerated didn't matter. What mattered was that they were believable, because Epstein didn't present himself as a threat. He presented himself as a solution. Once a victim entered his environment, the dynamics shifted. His residences, luxurious, controlled, and often isolated, became part of the mechanism. These weren't just homes. They were spaces designed to reinforce power and control. Victims were often alone in unfamiliar surroundings, far removed from anything that felt safe or familiar. The imbalance was immediate. They were in his world now. Travel also played a role. Some victims were flown on private planes or taken to different locations, further isolating them from their normal lives. The more removed they became, the harder it was to resist. The approach could be adjusted. If there wasn't, the behavior would escalate over time. What once felt inappropriate began to feel normalized. This is how control was established, not through immediate force, but through gradual manipulation. As the system grew, it began to resemble something even more unsettling. Investigators and accounts from victims described what could only be called an assembly line of exploitation, a steady flow of individuals being recruited, processed, and cycled through the system. New victims were brought in. They were paid. Some were encouraged to recruit others, and the cycle continued. It was not random. It was organized. And because it operated behind closed doors, within private properties and controlled environments, it remained largely hidden from public view. One of the most significant factors that allowed this system to persist was Epstein's wealth and perceived influence. He cultivated an image of power, someone who knew important people, someone who had connections that could could open doors or close them just as easily. Whether exaggerated or real, this perception created a sense of intimidation for victims. This could translate into fear, because if someone has the power to help you, they might also have the power to harm you. And that fear didn't always need to be spoken aloud. It existed in the background, shaping decisions and limiting resistance. Control within the system relied on a balance between reward and pressure. Victims were often given money, gifts, or opportunities. These rewards created a sense of obligation or dependency. But when expectations weren't met, the tone could shift. Some described subtle forms of intimidation, not always direct threats, but reminders of influence, of connection, of consequences. It created an environment where compliance felt safer than resistance. And over time, that environment became difficult to escape as the operation expanded. It reached beyond local communities. Reports indicated that victims were brought in from different regions, and even internationally. Some were connected through modeling agencies or other intermediaries. Others were transported between locations, further complicating any attempt to trace the full scope of the system. This expansion added layers of complexity. It wasn't just one place. The system created a cycle of dependency and guilt. It made it harder for individuals to come forward, because doing so meant confronting their own role within the system, even if that role was the result of manipulation. Experts note that this tactic is not uncommon in trafficking operations. It creates a self-sustaining structure where the system can grow without drawing attention to a single point of control. From the outside, nothing about Epstein's world. It became harder to dismiss the accounts as coincidence. Investigators and observers began to piece together the structure. Target vulnerability. Use intermediaries to build trust. Offer money or opportunity. Isolate the individual. Groom gradually. Maintain control through reward and pressure. Expand through recruitment. It was a system, and once that system became visible, the narrative changed. But even with increased attention, questions remain. How many people were involved? How much was known by those around him? And how was it allowed to continue for as long as it did? These unanswered questions have fueled ongoing debate and speculation. Because when something operates for so long without interruption, it raises the possibility that there were factors beyond what is immediately visible at its core. This story is not just about one individual. It is about how systems of manipulation can be built and sustained, how vulnerability can be identified and exploited, how power and perception can be used to create control, and perhaps most importantly, it is a reminder of how easily something dangerous can be disguised as something desirable. Jeffrey Epstein did not rely solely on force. He relied on psychology, on understanding what people needed, what they lacked, and what they hoped for. He used those insights to create a system where victims